everybody, I'm Miss Jessica from EVPL McCullough, and today we are continuing our chapter book story time. And last time when we were together, we did our Plinko board and it landed on adventure. We haven't had that one yet, so I'm very excited that we are going to be previewing 𝐿𝑜𝑜𝑡 by Jude Watson. And this one, I have seen the cover for this a couple of times just in our library and wonder what that book is about. It looks very interesting just based on the cover and the title, 𝐿𝑜𝑜𝑡, How to Steal a Fortune. So let's see what the inside cover says. Losers, weepers, stealers, keepers. On a foggy night in Amsterdam, a man falls from a rooftop to the wet pavement below. It's Alfie McQuinn, the notorious cat burglar, and he's dying. As sirens wail in the distance, Alfie manages to get out two last words to his young son, March. Find jewels. But March learns that his father is not talking about a stash of loot. He's talking about jewels his twin sister March never knew he had. No sooner than the two find each other, they're picked up by the police and sent to the world's worst orphanage. It's not prison, but it feels like it. March and Jules have no intention of staying put. They know their father's business inside and out, and they're tired of being pushed around. Just one good heist and they'll live the life of riches and freedom most kids only dream about. Watch out, there are wild kids on the loose and a crime spree coming. So already I'm kind of excited because we have some kids that are maybe going to try to steal some jewels. Actual jewels, not the name jewels. All right, so we are going to start, and they have kind of a really interesting page here, so kind of a night sky, and it has a quote in it. Behind every great fortune, there is a crime, by Balzac. Okay, so now we're going to start over here. Before frozen moonlight. No thief likes a full moon. Like mushrooms and owls, they do their best work in the dark. There it is, a fat, satisfied moon, bright and silvery white, tracing a line on the dark lake that leads right to the three thieves who have paused to examine the loot. It has been the perfect heist. In and out, a hot knife through sweet butter. Months of planning, practice runs, disagreements that ballooned into fights. Two of the thieves are barely speaking to the third. In the end, it didn't matter. In the end, they got the goods. A priceless emerald brooch owned by Catherine the Great. The crack in the sky, the world's most famous turquoise. The 60-carat Makepeace diamond, said to be the most brilliant gem in the history of the world. The stones are all notorious, cursed, rumored to have caused more deaths, bankruptcies, suicides, and indigestion than any moldering mummy could ever hope to inspire. The owner of all these jewels? Carlotta Grimstone, one of the richest women on the planet. Early on in her career as a socialite, she found herself competing with prettier, sillier girls for attention. She liked getting her picture in the paper. So, with Daddy's permission, she decided to make a name for herself by collecting all the world's cursed stones. She even dreamed up a nickname and hired a publicist to drop it to any media outlet that would listen and print it. But fate's temptress never stuck. Thieves don't believe in curses. How can something worth so much be cursed? It's a ticket to the sweet life. The only people who say money can't buy happiness are the poor suckers shining a billionaire's shoes. The stones wink at them from a flat rock catching the moonlight. Hello, sweet life, they are all thinking. But even a perfect heist has its pitfalls. The third thief has violated their agreement. He has snatched up a pretty necklace for his girlfriend. It's a bauble, not nearly worth what the other stones are. He wants to keep it. There are objections. They don't know what these 7 moonstones in the necklace are worth, but they look unusually fine. Since he violated the terms of the heist, why should he get the spoils? Fine, the third thief says, snatching up the necklace and twisting it around his finger in an arc. Then fence it with the others. Sell it to another crook for less than it's worth if it makes you happy. The clasp breaks, the gold links falling away, and the moonstones seem to hover in the air. How is that possible? before falling onto the rocky beach. The stones form a perfect circle. It's as though drops of moonlight have frozen on the ground. They glow with a light that is not quite blue, not quite white, not quite silver. It is the most beautiful sight the three thieves have ever seen. So beautiful they cannot move. They can't look away. Then there comes a shock to their bodies, so electric it takes away their breath. Dread runs through them like ice through rock. They might shatter from it. The third thief sees himself captured. You will be caught tonight and made to pay. The second thief receives a death sentence, death by water before the moon is set. The first thief sees the worst vision of all. Before the passage of 13 years, the two birthed together will die together. The sound of a helicopter wakes them out of what feels like a trance. The searchlight sweeps the water and the path of light hits the beach. It lands on the third thief. He snarls the curses that people have been unlucky enough to find themselves caught use. He blames the other two. Betrayed! With quicker reflexes, the other two have dived behind a boulder, flattened against it, pressing themselves into shadows. The third thief, the angry one, is closest to the emerald brooch and the crack in the sky. The makerpiece diamond rolls away from his fingers. He grabs the other two gems and runs full tilt toward any shadow he can find. The searchlight follows him. The circle of moonstones is just inches away from the two thieves. Pressed against the shadow, one thief dares to reach out and scoop up the stones. The two dash through the boulders toward the line of trees. They have practiced this route many times, and they know it well. Through the woods, around the lake, to the cliff. They scramble up the cliff quickly, knowing each handhold. Vaulting over the top, they race to the cover of the pines. They slip into the entrance of the cave. Even in early summer, the cave glitters with ice. The mist cools their skin. They know each other so well. They don't need to exchange a word. One glance does it. Coincidence. It won't happen to us. No such thing as prophecies. How can you be so sure? Because I'm rational. According to who? You're standing in an ice cave with a bag of moonstones and the police are after you. That's rational? It's amazing what you can do with your eyes. The fall of the water against the cave wall is like a mirror reflecting darkness. They drop on their hands and knees and half crawl, half slither through a crack in the wall. They inch out slowly into the open air. They are high above the lake now. The thunder of waterfalls surprises them, so much more powerful than they'd seen before. The stones under their feet are slick and glitter with ice. The second thief turns, smiles, is ready to say something, slips on the rock. This is not part of the plan. The thief goes over backwards, swept into the torrent. The first thief's cry is an anguished howl. Chapter 1. Now, pocket full of stones. Never trust a guy who says, trust me. Never give your real name to a cop. Never let someone steal your getaway car. It was that last piece of his father's advice that March McQuinn found himself contemplating at 3 a.m. on a picturesque bridge over a dark canal in Amsterdam. Only it wasn't a getaway car, it was a getaway bike, and someone had just pinched it. Just about the worst thing you can do to a thief is steal his stuff. March, especially indignant, he'd actually paid for the bike. He checked the time on his cell. He felt the pressure in his drumming pulse, but he wasn't about to panic. He just had to steal a bike in about 7 minutes. His old man, world-famous cat burglar Alfred McQuinn, was going to have a fistful of diamonds and be looking for an exit. That would be March. Mist curled along the surface of the canal. All the good citizens of Amsterdam were snoring underneath their eaterdowns. The weeping edges of a yellow moon dissolved and reformed on a dark water as the flow of the tide moved through. March intently scanned the rows of bicycles chained to the railing, searching for his target. Timing is everything, bud. The difference between $1 million and a 25 to life can come down to 30 seconds. The red one with the basket and the combination lock called to March. Steal me! Battered fenders, but the chain was oiled and the tires were good. There were roughly 64,000 different number sequences possible in one combination lock. He could find the correct one in a minute flat. All it took was the right touch. March felt for the right drag as the chamber hit the number again. Got it. Then counterclockwise, clockwise again. The lock swung open. He took the time to let out a long, shaky breath. If he messed up, Alfie would forgive him, but he'd never forgive him. He threw his brown paper sack in the basket. The cover story had been decided a week ago. If he got stopped by a cop, he was bringing his night watchman father his breakfast. There was brown bread and cheese and an apple in the sack. Remember, the right prop can save a shaky cover story. March flew over the bridge, legs pumping hard. He'd been over the route many times. He had walked it with Alfie, both of them munching on herring sandwiches, looking like what Alfie called ham and eggers, the normal American tourists their fake passports claimed they were. Dan Sherwood from Soyesset, Long Island, and his son, Dan Jr. He'd ridden it half a dozen times with Alfie timing him. They'd gone over every detail, and nothing could go wrong. Even though Alfie always said, if you think nothing can go wrong, you'd better think again. He flew down the last street and turned the corner. The Grand Hotel rose up from the canal like a tanker about to sail the North Sea. He cut the bike toward the rear courtyard, bumped down over the cobblestones to the loading dock, and skidded to a stop only a minute late. Any second, his pop should be shimmying down the drain pipe and tossing him the jewels. Trying to slow the urgent racing of his heart, he scanned the facade of the hotel. No pop. When he tried to spot Alfred McQuinn, it was always smart to check the roof. March craned his neck and looked up. Alfie was just a dark shadow moving along the dormers high above the cobblestone courtyard. The first faint alarm began to ding inside him. There was improvisation in each and even the tightest plan, but something must have gone wrong. Unless his timing was off, he checked his cell again. March glanced back up, and this time, Alfie was looking down at him. They had a secret signal when they bumped into each other accidentally in public, and Alfie didn't want March to acknowledge him. He would smooth his left eyebrow. Sorry, that one. It meant, I'm working, get out of here. But why now? Had something gone wrong? Alfie's hand moved, and then he tossed something off the roof. It seemed to catch the moonlight, then hover and spin, something bright and bluish white, and as small as a star. Before he had time to think, March ran toward it. It seemed to fall in slow motion, and he felt as though he had all the time in the world to catch it. He opened the paper bag, and it fell inside with the slightest little ping. March looked inside to see what it was. It was the smallest space of a moment, the beat of a heart that counted, because the next time he looked up, his father was falling. Chapter 2, Floating, Falling. Alfie fell backward through the air, face to the night sky, as though he had said to himself, the heck with climbing down. I think I'll just float. The dropping seemed to take forever. March felt his cry explode from his gut, but it stayed inside. All his life he'd been trained not to express emotion in public unless it was manufactured part of a plan. The sound of the landing was like no sound March had ever heard. It seemed to sound like a watermelon would make, or a plastic jug of water, not a person. March ran. The last few inches he slid on his knees against the stones, stone against bone. Pop! Alfie seemed strangely unbruised, filling March with hope. Then he noticed the blood pooling behind his father's head. Alfie's hand came up, fingers fluttering like a sputtering candle. March reached for that hand to still those fingers. He had never seen his father with shaking hands. Jewel thieves don't have hands that tremble. March? He swallowed against the fear that constricted his throat. Pop, wait. A month. What? Alfie coughed a terrible, awful sound, thick and bubbling. Promise, a month. Promise, but then find jewels. Each word came out as a small puff of air. Stick. Rag. With what seemed like enormous effort, his father touched March's cheek and his hair. Follow the falls to the day. Don't die, March pleaded. Please don't die. No. Blood frothed and came out of Alfie's mouth. His eyes were unfocused now, staring up at the moon. March collapsed back on his heels. He didn't believe in this moment. He hung suspended in it, but it wasn't real. Surely he could change it. He could return to himself on the bridge. He could pedal faster, and then he'd have time to yell, "Don't slip or watch out!" March heard a siren, that European wee-oh, wee-oh sound, and footsteps running and stopping behind him. The moment was over. Time had ticked on, and it took him to a place where his father was dead. Behind him, there were sudden fragments of sounds and movement, a half circle of people talking in hushed voices, the doorman, a couple of kitchen workers. The ambulance drew up. A police car squealed to a halt. The officials were there. You see a uniform? You scram. March stumbled away as the ambulance workers ran over. He kept backing up, his eyes on the medics. He watched them bend over the body, shine a light in Alfie's eyes, feel for a pulse, get out equipment, then cut away Alfie's jacket, and diamonds spilled out of his pockets. The small crowd gasped. The police perked up. March saw the instant medics gave up. Two of them exchanged a glance, and one shook his head. Their movements slowed, and one of them started to put equipment away. There was no need to hurry now. A terrible anguish filled his chest and pressed against his heart. More talking in Dutch. The circle around Alfie was growing. A couple of hotel guests had heard the commotion and come out. Tomorrow it would be a story. How a man with diamonds in his pockets fell down from the sky. One policeman squatted over the body. He said a name with great excitement. Alfred McQuinn? And then someone in the circle, the guy in the white apron, the baker trying to be helpful, was pointing, and March picked out a word he knew. Boy. By the time someone pointed again, it was to air. Chapter 3. Where's the boy? Boy alone on the street, 3 a.m. Don't run, don't be seen, keep close to the buildings, keep your eyes open, move fast. Panic doesn't get you anything except arrested. If you get stopped, remember your cover story. March had lost the map in his head. The route he'd memorized was gone. The streets suddenly looked all the same, with their narrow houses with sharply peaked roofs and tidily painted doors, yellow, blue, red, black. There wasn't a straight line in Amsterdam. All the buildings seemed to tilt. It felt to March as though they would tumble down on him, a shower of bricks and window boxes full of tulips. Where is the boy? Nothing felt real except the pavement against the soles of his sneakers. How hard it had been for his father to touch his cheek. How much strain on his face, how much determination when the gesture had been done so casually so many times. A hand on his shoulder, a kiss on top of his head. He'd never feel that again. March saw the days ahead of him, so many days and years when he wouldn't feel that hand. March's knees gave way. He sat on the sidewalk. He knew he shouldn't. No doubt some stray insomniac would look outside his bedroom window, and his proper Dutch mind would want to get help, for the boy collapsed in the middle of the sidewalk, holding his head with both hands. Tears dripped through his fingers. He scrubbed them away. Shock made everything so sharp and yet so far away. The paper bag sat on his lap. In it was the cheese sandwich which they were going to split for breakfast, back at the flat. March thought of the many things his father loved and would never eat again. Pommes frites and herring sandwiches and American potato chips and licorice. Things he'd said they'd do together. See a Yankees game. Spend a month in New Zealand. Go to a museum without playing the what would you steal and how game. March tossed the bag aside, hating the sandwich because Alfie would never eat it. The stone tumbled out, aglow in the moonlight. It was the last thing that his father had given him. Maybe it was worth something. Or else, why had Alfie thrown it, knowing March would catch it because his son had never let him down? Just yesterday, he'd said it. You've never let me down, March. March gripped the stone hard. Don't let him down. Then keep moving. It was only took a block before he knew he was being followed. All right, we're going to stop there. So if you would like to keep reading, we just left off with chapter 3 and you can pick up with chapter 4. So this book is available to check out as a print copy. We also have it as a playaway, which is like a little mini MP3 player that you can listen to. It is also available as an e-audiobook so that you can listen to it that way as well as a digital copy. It does not have an e-book, but we do have plenty of print copies. So if you are interested in continuing this story, I, for one, want to know what's up with those jewels. Why are they like predicting the future? How in the world did March catch it when it's being thrown off a building? And why and how does he have a secret sister that he's going to have to find? So I have lots of questions. I am one of those people that I am a very big fan of heist movies and books and stories about heists. So people that do go and steal, which is not right to do, but if it's fictionalized in a movie or in a book, I'm all about it. So I definitely will keep reading this because this is definitely my genre that I am interested in. So hopefully you enjoyed our adventure book as well. Okay, so we're going to pause there and I'll get out our Plinkle board so that we can see what we're going to be reading next time. So I'll be back in just a moment. All right, so let's find out what we're reading next time. So don't forget, we have our categories. I'm going to start over there. We have fantasy, humor, historical fiction, science fiction, Miss Jessica's Choice, adventure, which is what we just had, realistic fiction, mystery, and spooky. And because we are doing a variety pack for our chapter book story time, if it happens to land on something that we just had recently, I will probably redo it so that we get a little bit of variety. These Plinko chips are so temperamental. They just love to fall off. It's so frustrating. Let's try this again. Third time's the charm. Ooh, that went all over the place and we landed in science fiction. All right, so next time we will be reading a science fiction book. So I will hopefully see you then when we are reading our next chapter book. And don't forget to follow us at all of our social media. If you go to evpl.org, you can see all the resources that we have. We have an events page that will tell you what's coming up. So all of our different virtual story times like Chapter Book Storytime, plus some other fun things that we have. And we also have some vlogs that have all kinds of different activities that you can try at home as well. All right, so thank you again for joining me. I hope to see you again soon. Bye.